members. We have Paige Rassett, we have Dan Ferrero, Carl Walton, Lucas Cherry, and we have Jennifer Roy, our staff liaison and zoning enforcement officer. Also present we have Bud Knorr, first selectman, and Jeff Board, our town engineer in the back, and our Glenn Chalder with Planometrics. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight to our public information meeting. Our commission has been working for about a year now, updating our zoning regulations. So tonight, we're interested in getting your thoughts and feedback on the work we've done so far. I'd like to stress that there is no application before the commission, and so this is not a public formal hearing on a specific proposal. Tonight we are simply sharing information on the work to date and hope that your comments and feedback will help us with our make our zoning regulations better. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Glenn Chalder from Planometrics, who has been a tremendous help in guiding us through this process. Glenn?
Thank you, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. If at any point you can't just put up your hands and I'll know to pick up the volume a little bit. My name is Glenn Chalder. I'm a planning and zoning consultant, and my work basically is to work with towns and try to help them make their regulations better, as Jill talked about. To give us an overview of what the commission has been working on, I put together a PowerPoint presentation to kind of give you a sense of the whole situation. It'll probably take about 10 minutes, and then we're looking forward to public comment as we move forward. So as you're probably aware, zoning regulations are the main tools the communities use to guide land use activities in the community. It's a set of rules that we all agree to live by, both ourselves and our neighbors. So it's an important thing in the community. The Commission recognized that the regulations we had in the community hadn't been updated in a while, and they felt it was important to review and update the regulations to reflect recent court cases, recent changes in state statutes, and just good best management practices for what's going on these days. To try to reorganize the regulations to make them user-friendly. There were provisions which were important, which were kind of buried in places in the regulations that you might not expect to find them. So as a homeowner trying to figure out what you could or couldn't do, you had to almost read the whole set of regulations, and that didn't make it particularly user-friendly. And we also tried to clarify them to use plainer English to make it clearer, if you will, for people, if you're reading the regulations, to be able to understand what's going on. So those are the primary goals that started this process. The chair indicated the meeting tonight is to inform you about what we've been working on and get your feedback as we go forward. The regulations themselves are organized into 4 main parts or components, and I'm going to kind of summarize each of these 4 major parts for you, because if you were going to use the regulations, you probably want to search for some information in each one of these 4 major parts. So the first part is the basic setup of the regulations, if you will. Section 1 of the regulations is what we're calling here regulatory basics. It covers some of the legal gobbledygook that goes up front. What's the purpose? What are the statutory authority that we're working under? How are the regulations going to be enforced? And some basic rules. And really one of the most important ones is the one that's highlighted here at the bottom. It basically says the zoning regulations are constructed in such a way that if something is not clearly permitted in the regulations, then the interpretation is prohibited. So that's intended to be very protective for the town to say, if we're going to allow a new use, it's going to come before us and we're going to accept it. It doesn't just happen because the regulations don't mention it. The next major section of the regulation, section 2, is words and terms. And these are definitions. I think we all agree that definitions are always important in things that we're working on. To define the terms, we've used graphics in the regulations to try to explain concepts, which we use every day in zoning, but other people may not be used to. So, for example, we have illustrations on one page about how we measure building height depending on the type of roof. And that's important for people to know. In addition to the regulations, we group related terms together so that even though alphabetically they may not be next to each other, the concepts are so related, they make more sense when they're together. And we've also added pictures to explain this. So we're hoping that this section of the regulations will make it easier easier for users to figure out what they need to know. So the second major part of the regulations of the 4 elements is zones and uses. At this point in time, Somers has 2 residential districts, the residential A and the residential A1. The lot size that the town requires is the same in each. The lot sizes which are on the ground may be different, but our regulations are set up with those 2 districts. And as part of the regulation, we're talking about establishing a new residential district. We're calling this residential
B.
B. We had talked about A2, so I just wanted to thank you. And essentially what we're doing here is in Somers Center and Somersville Center, historically there are a number of lots that were created which are much smaller than the 1 acre we require today. And in the regulations, our setbacks in the different zoning districts are calibrated for a 1 acre lot. So if you have a ½ acre lot, the yard setbacks and some of the other standards can be a little challenging to have to work with, causing you to have to get variances or other things for things you might want to do on your property. So because these areas are served by sewer, for the most part, we've introduced, for the lots which are less than an acre, a Residence B district in those 2 areas of town. So as a result, going forward, there will be 3 residential districts in Somers if the commission adopts this change. There's a section in the regulation that identifies what uses, we call them principal uses, that you can make on a piece of property. There are standards, tables in the regulations that identify different types of uses, and then these are the 3 different zoning districts. And in the boxes, it tells you what type of approval you would need to be able to do that. So these tables, which are organized by topic or theme, are meant to be user-friendly and say, if I want to do this, this is the zoning district that permits it, or in my zoning district, these are the types of uses that are permitted. There's also tables for what we call accessory uses and structures. So that's, for example, an accessory structure is a shed, or a detached garage, a swing set, things like that are listed here in the accessory section. There's also a section here where we've organized all the dimensional standards, what's required in terms of setbacks from the street, how far a building needs to be away from the property line or away from your neighbors in a sense, and other standards are identified in that table. In addition, there's a section which is standards for some specific uses, such as a home occupation, age-restricted housing, open space subdivisions, accessory apartments, and adaptive reuse. Those are listed in that section because they were lengthy enough they didn't really fit in the table. So the tables would refer to this section for specific standards. That brings us to section 4, which is the business and industrial districts. One of the proposals before the commission is that in the center of Somers and Somersville, to establish what's called a village district. The village district is a special type of zoning district where the commission has architectural review authority as part of new development to ensure that it fits into the character of the community. The business zone, there's a couple of situations in town where the business zone will remain. We're creating a new planned amusement recreation zone for Sunny's Place. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then in the industrial zoning districts, we have some situations in town where the zone line splits a property in half. Part is industrial, part is residential, and where we feel it's appropriate, we're extending the industrial zone to the back of the property to create opportunities for economic development. Just as for the residential districts, we're using tables again to identify the uses that are permitted in the different zoning districts and the type of approval that's required. And the same thing for accessory uses and structures in those districts again. Generally what happens with a set of zoning regulations is that the property owner would have a piece of property in mind, look at the zoning map and say it's in this particular zoning district, and from that they can go to the book and almost figure out everything they need to know fairly quickly. That's our hope and intention. And again, the area and dimensional standards are in the table as well. Now, the planned amusement recreation district is Sunny's Place. The physical improvements are already essentially approved by commission approval, special permit, etc. What we're talking about is setting up a special approval process for special events at the site. This could be things like concerts or parties or other things like that. And we don't want that to be unrestricted, as in they can happen at any time in any fashion. We're trying to set up a situation that maintains adequate parking and other things for that facility. Section 5 of the regulations is what we're calling special districts. There's two types of special districts in town. The first of which is the floodplain district. The map in the back, or on the side here, which says the possible zoning map, has some green hatched areas on it. These are areas in town which are recognized by the federal government as floodplain areas, and they may flood on occasion. So the map contains, the regulations, contain the specific standards that relate to that designation, and the map is to show people where that exists in town. The second type of district is what's called the Planned Development District. This was recently adopted for the Summersville Mill site to promote redevelopment of that parcel, and so that regulation has simply been carried over and codified in Section 5.2 of the regulations. Section 6 of the regulations is again use-related provisions. So if there are things related to prohibited uses, horses and ponies, temporary uses, public utilities, alcohol beverages, and wood-burning furnaces, specific provisions for those are in this section of the regulations. So now into the third major part of the regulation is what we're calling standards. Now standards are the things that go along with many uses in town. So it includes things like parking requirements, or landscaping, or signage, erosion and sediment control, lighting and illumination, stormwater management, performance standards, groundwater protection, access management, things like that. So that as the commission would review an application, these would be the standards that we would want to make sure that there's enough parking on the site, that the signage is appropriate, the lighting is again appropriate for summers, and those standards are in this section of the regulation. There's also Section 8, which is special provisions. This relates to some dimensional exceptions. For example, when we measure building setback, if that overhang here was a building eave, what we're saying is we're going to measure the setback to the building wall, and we're going to give an exception for the eave. So the eave can intrude into the yard, because eaves help buildings look better. Chimneys, if we want to add a chimney onto the property, they might have to get a variance if it's too close to the property line. This grants an exception for things like that in the regulations. There's also a section here for what's called non-conforming conditions. These are generally parcels that pre-existed the regulations and don't fit into the rules. And these are how zoning gives those special treatment. There's also regulations in here for telecommunications facilities, for earth removal and filling, and again a section on adult-oriented establishments. Lastly, the last major section of the regulations are what's called procedures. Procedures is what steps you would need to go through to walk out the door with a permit and be able to build, construct, or undertake your project. There are different types of zoning approvals. There's situations in the regulations where it says no permit is required. You just can go do that. Other situations, a zoning permit from staff, or a site plan, or a special use permit, where you would come and see the commission to get that approval, and those requirements again are spelled out in this section. So those are the four main parts of the regulations, and again, most people would have a site in mind, go to the regulations, and hopefully figure out fairly quickly what it is that they can do. At the same time, the zoning map is being updated. Excuse me. The current zoning map for town is hand-drawn. And the technology these days is to do visual mapping. What we're proposing to do is to adopt a digital zoning map for town. The map on the left back here is our digital evaluation of the existing zoning map. So we believe that's how your property or other properties in town are zoned today. The map to the far right is the possible future zoning map showing what we think the zoning will be. And then the map in the middle is the zoning map changes. So if the parcel's white in the middle, there's no change. If it's color-coded, you could look at the color code legend to understand how the zoning of that parcel might be changed. We're adding a village residential district, as I talked about earlier, village business, PAR zone, and again expanding the industrial zones a little bit. Commission believes these are major improvements in the regulations. We think we've hit our target in terms of addressing important issues, making them easy to use and easy to understand. And we think the zoning map is going to be a big improvement as well, because we'll be able to put that online so that people can see it and learn what they need to know quickly. So that's an overview of the regulations in the map. At this point, I'll turn it back to Bill for public comment.
Okay, at this time, we'll take public comment. Anybody that would like to have a question answered or comment, we have a mic right here in the middle of the room. You can come forward. And state your name and address for the record.
My name is Joseph Duffy. I'm at 3 Meadowbrook Road. I support the Village Business District. And the reason I support it is because I think it'll restrict. I think it will restrict future motor vehicle sales.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to? Well, they face the commission.
Yeah. Wasn't it?
Try again. Testing.
You want this one?
That was working. There we go.
There or there?
My name is Joseph Duffy. I'm from 3 Meadowbrook Road in Summers. I'd like to voice my support for the Village Business District. I think in the future it'll restrict motor vehicle sales and gasoline sales in inappropriate areas of the town. I was wondering if the northeast corner of Main Street and Village Road, Route 83 and 190, is currently considered gasoline sales approved.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh. Bank of America.
Bank of America lot.
Yeah.
Penny has approval.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
In the special use permit criteria, it's on page 176. It deals with, section F deals with traffic congestion. And what it says, the street serving the proposed use shall be adequate to carry the proposed traffic, and adequate provision shall be made for entering and leaving the site in such a manner that no undue hazard to vehicular and pedestrian traffic or undue traffic congestion shall be created. I'd just like to say that I think it's kind of vague. That if my next door neighbor comes for a special use permit and he can afford a traffic engineer or traffic consultant that says that there'll be no impact to the traffic, I really don't know what my options are under this. Okay? So I was wondering if it could be created to have a little more bite, be a little bit more specific on what excessive traffic congestion actually is. Okay? When I look at the possible zoning map, I'd like to voice my support for maintaining Zone A from Watchog Road north to the Massachusetts border along the Hall Hill Road corridor. I'd also like to say just quickly that I don't think political affiliation should ever be considered in zoning requests. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Regan, 597 Hall Hill Road. I have great appreciation for the work that the Zoning Commission has done to provide the best quality of life and business opportunities for Summers residents. The committee was thoughtful and considered what's best for the town and its residents. I agree with the Commission's goals to simplify requirements in village and business districts and to not create situations that might create neighborly disputes. I also agree with the decision not to make changes to the A zone. Residents in this zone purchased their property knowing of the restrictions in the area. Changing the uses in the area would create a hardship to the current residents as far as their quality of life and property value goes. If a resident wants to start running a business out of a home or use their property for other non-permitted uses, they should find a property that's in a location that allows it. I am wholeheartedly in favor of moving forward with the proposal that the Commission outlined this month, and I think that it has the best interests of the residents in mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
I should know better than to follow her, just to let you know. But similar to Karen, My name's Johanna, and I live on 15 Bilton Road. The zoning commission, I've been to 3 or 4 of the last meetings. You take into consideration the impact to neighbors and neighborhoods, which I think is tantamount to your charge. And you have a lot of masters to serve between the town people, the regulations, administration. You do a very good job of it. You've created these districts with very little changes to the existing structure. And frankly, you buy a house with a set of rules, and if those rules change after you purchase your house, not only do you have a financial impact, but there's an intrinsic value you may have lost, because you buy a house and you don't expect a guy to run a garage out of his, car repair out of his garage. So I'm all in favor of the way the A and A1 status quo is, so thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Dan Thayer, 10 Bolton Road. Couple of things that I have a question about. Under section 3.4, area yard and bulk regulations, it says minimum lot area. I thought we had a minimum lot of 1 acre. And yet we're showing 40,000 square feet, which is several thousand short of an acre. It's about 0.92 of an acre, I think. My math. I may be wrong.
It's a builder's acre.
It's, yes.
I think in the current regulations, what we call an acre, for people who don't know, is 43,560 square feet. But generally speaking, the community use a round number of 40,000 square feet, and I believe that has been the standard for some time. We'll take a look at that, make sure, but we believe we're carrying the previous existing number forward into the future. That is our intent.
Okay. And just a comment about section 4.6, the PAR zone. In the table of contents and elsewhere, you don't spell it out. I think it might be instructive for the citizens to know that what we're talking about, as opposed to glossing over I don't know what a PAR zone is, so I'll keep on going, versus a permitted amusement and recreation area, which seems to be pretty much set out for Sonny's Place and nothing else. And after reading this over, it doesn't seem to regulate it much. You've already had regulations about special events and hiring of police officers and parking and traffic. And I'm wondering why it's ending up in zoning, because it appears if I manage to get my master plan approved, then I'm golden. And if my master plan includes a Ferris wheel and a roller coaster, and they approve it, does everybody want to live with that? So I throw it out there because I don't know what the answer is, but I have a question about it. Finally, section 8.3. This concerns telecommunications facilities, and generally I agree with everything here, except there's 46 people in this town who are licensed radio amateurs. And there is absolutely no exception made or any provision made for them. And since 1985, there's been a decision from the FCC called PRB1, which asks that reasonable accommodations be made. And reading through, it says that if I wanted to put up a tower on my own property of typically 50 to 60 feet for amateur radio antennas, I would have to have the balloon test. I would have to have surveying. And I think for someone who pursues this as a hobby and not as a commercial interest, I think it's a bit much, and maybe somewhere along the line there can be some reduced requirements at least. I'm not saying exemption because I don't think that's wise, but something less than the full range of things that are required here. And these people, if you want to check, live throughout the town. Hall Hill, Bilton, Colton Road, they're 9th District. Some already have towers. I presume they'd be grandfathered. But the guy moving in next week, or the week after these are passed, would have this whole long shopping list of things that he has to do, which essentially makes it economically unfeasible for him to put that tower up. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you for the comment.
Ralph Williams, 42 Springfield Road. First of all, I want to thank you for the residential B area zone designation, which is in which I would live in an 1890 house on a postage stamp lot. I think you allow for the fact that it's near enough to the center of town, that and that you have older houses, that people might be looking for adaptive reuses and whatnot, and to find a way to do so in a way that promotes the character of that neighborhood. I am kind of curious, because I heard at some point it was being referred to as a village residential district. Now residential B, I heard village residential showing up a couple times in the discussion, the PowerPoint discussion tonight. Is there a distinct, I know village district occurs under Connecticut statute. Is there some difference between what you're envisioning and what a village district is? And if there is there any particular reason you would be doing it differently?
If I may.
Yes.
Under Connecticut state law, there's something called a village district, and that name, that designation, is the designation which gives the commission the ability to do architectural review. So using the phrase village in a zoning designation can cause confusion. And so while we had called it village residential for a while, we were concerned that people would think that we would have now architectural control over people's houses, and that wasn't the commission's intention. So we decided to go with residential B, and I'll check through the regs to make sure that it doesn't say village residential anywhere. So we're going to use that term on the business, because that will be a village business in a village district, but we're planning not to use it on residential.
Well, I asked largely because in your PowerPoint you did use village residential on at least one occasion tonight, so that was part of my head scratch.
I had to make sure everybody's paying attention.
Okay. The only other thing I would mention apropos of what Dan Thayer said was, Sonny's Place clearly is not the only amusement venue in this town. In fact, it's probably not the principal one where concerts would occur. I would think that the Lipton property on Route 83 would be just as liable for an inclusion in such a category as Sonny's Place. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ralph.
Hi, Michele Engineering, 2 Meadowbrook Road. First of all, I want to thank the zoning board for their hard work on this project over the last year. It's our view of the zoning as presented in the draft.
Meadowbrook?
Jerry and Michelle Tarbox, 2 Meadowbrook Road, Summers. Again, we want to thank the zoning commission for all the hard work over the past year with this project. It's our view that the zoning as presented in this draft is appropriate for the town of Summers, and we support it. The residential zones as proposed, A, A1, and B, properly reflect the character of the town and preserve its nature. They also protect the public health, the safety, the welfare, and convenience, and the property values of the community. The current A and A1 designations recognize both the rural character and the traditional residential uses of these properties. The A zone, which represents approximately 2% of the residential zone, restricts institutional, recreational infrastructure projects within this zone. These limitations, established in the 1960s, have acted to further preserve the nature of the town as it's grown and should remain as proposed. It's our view the zoning as proposed meets the greater needs of the community and its citizens and should be approved as presented. Thank you for your time. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you very much. That can't be it.
Is that it? No?
No?
Hi, Jane Legg, Lindale Drive. A couple of years ago, we found out that all of a sudden, well, our home had been there 50-plus years. And then we have a gentleman buying property behind us, knowing it was zoned residential and commercial. He decided to, I don't know, drive tractor trailers or something, I don't know what it was, and pave the whole place over. So we took him to the zoning board, and we won, and he decided that he hired a lawyer and decided he would sue the town because he didn't like this. Now, We ended up in Superior Court because the town wouldn't back the zoning board. So we ended up in Superior Court. And he finally, walked for whatever reason. But this is part of your plan now, is you're going to give him his, you want to make these zones all property, so you're going to revert this back to him. And my neighborhood, we feel like we had a hard-won result here, and that with the stroke of a pen, that you can just revert this back to a commercial district in our backyard. I find it very distressing. The rest of the ideas, I think, are absolutely excellent. But I really wish you'd look this over, because we have a lot of money involved and a lot of time in Superior Court, and supposedly we got this to stay the same the way he purchased it, which was residential and commercial. And he bought it that way. He knew it was that way. Well, we call it, it's our buffer zone from Field Road. And anybody who's been on Field Road lately, I mean, really, you know.
Yeah,
So-
it's approved for.
Yeah,
it's
that's
And-
approved for
It's
residential.
approved for residential use.
It's
It
residential.
is
residential.
Yeah.
But according to the map, it's going to revert back to, because he wants to put these all in order, right? Is that not true?
I think I know the property you're talking about. I wasn't aware of all of this situation, so I made a note. I think we'll take a closer
Okay,
look at
please
that.
take a closer look at it, because, we spent a lot of time in court over this.
Understood.
It is already approved for a residential project, affordable housing.
Yeah, but that was 5 years. Within 5 years he had, and he didn't do it.
I'm not aware of that approval expiring.
It's,
I have it. I have all the information.
Okay.
It's any, a Barrelful, if you would like me to share it. Just saying.
Yeah, we'll take a
We
look
will
at that,
look at
Jane.
Dean Hills, 115 Wood Road. My request is pretty tame. I'd just like to ask the board if they would consider reducing the setback requirement for non-permanent structures, 200 square foot or less, for, reed shed,
Shed.
okay?
Yep.
That's all I ask.
Yep. Thank you.
200 square feet or less.
Yeah.
So, yes.
sorry, gentlemen.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Hill.
Just a personal, did you say front yard setback?
No, he said setback.
I think there is a provision in the regulations for structure plus 200 square feet, and the setback, I believe, is cut in half. So I believe that's in the regulations, but,
We'll look at it.
see me after, we'll take a look.
Words off and stuff.
Hi.
Hi.
Susan Peck, 91 Skyridge Drive. I haven't read over the new regulations, so I don't know exactly where it's going. But I also did notice, like someone else spoke about the PAR regulation, and that it's only for Sunny's Place. And it seems like we've probably let special use permits or whatever all along for Sunny's Place, because now the people on Robert Road and Four Bridges Road have all those lights in their yard. I bet they're thrilled. So if we go forward, I mean, are they ever they're gonna be the only entertainment venue ever in Summers? I don't know, as a matter of fact, the Four-Town Fairgrounds could be a place where there would be entertainment, not necessarily at Four-Town Fair time or something like that, something to consider, but I don't know. I think if you just limit that kind of entertainment venue thing to Sunny's Place, eventually someday you're gonna be redoing the regulations again for another place that wants to come in and do something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Lipton, 452 South Road. I again would like to thank the zoning board and staff for all their efforts and hard work into trying to revise these zoning regulations. I got a few comments I'd just like the board to consider. One is the planned development district, the one that you're proposing maybe at the Summers Mill, that also thought be given to the 11 acres that Johanna's occupies. We have property that basically stretches from Johanna's all the way to where the package store is at the stoplight, in the rear of all those homes. Currently, your zoning map has the zone split in half, so half my property is in that business zone and the other half is in a residential zone. I would like you to consider possibly making that also into the same type of development zone that you're considering for the Summersville Mill property. There's enough acreage there to also be able to possibly put in some condominiums of some sort, so that maybe younger couples that can't afford to live in Summers would have the ability to have an alternative place that they could live until at some point they might be able to afford one of our homes in town. But it does have water, it does have sewer, it's basically the only other property that's that large that something could be constructed in there. And if that's not considered, at least make it so it's one zone, so it's not split in half. I'd also like to thank you for keeping the A1 and the A zones. I think that was a good job on your part. I think it's worked for all these years. I think it can work for many more. Also, there was a couple things that was discussed at the last zoning meeting. I'd just like to make comments on that. One of them was to eliminate the requirement to have a foundation with a basement that Summers might consider in these new regulations, to basically be able to build on a slab. And I think that's a terrible idea, because basically you could then construct homes in areas that were normally wet, that you couldn't have a finished basement. You could basically, in a wet area, as long as you stay above that flood area, you could basically build a home. And I think that that's not a good idea. End up with shantytown. Also, in your agricultural description, I didn't see anything that would basically cover all the things that we do at our farm. I mean, we grow all types of commodities and we manufacture grain there with our commodities. So I'd like to see something in the regulations that would basically cover what we've been doing there for years. We basically grow all different types of grains. We grind them, we mix them. Someday we may pelletize them. We're not doing that now, but we basically take care of a large area of the state of Connecticut. Basically all the small farms come to us on a regular basis to get their grain products. But there's nothing in the regulations under that in agriculture. So that's something I would like the board to consider. And also, I know that there was talk about the state had eliminated the square use requirements and said in some courts in the state that they threw that out. And we have requirements currently in our regulations that require a certain square footage per A zone or A1 zone. And I don't really care who's challenged other towns. Let them challenge us. We should not eliminate those requirements in this town. They should stay on the books. And if someone wants to challenge it, then let them challenge it. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Carl, could you explain Glenn, explain the requirement, that the last comment, understanding it, because it's even...
We should talk about it as a board.
Oh, okay, good, okay.
Glenn is keeping a tally of all the comments, and he's going to address them
Okay.
after.
Oh, good.
No, I think.
We're gonna address them.
We've got a complete tabulation and organize them so the commission.
Yeah,
can
so we
have
can-
our next and make sure that
yeah.
nobody's thoughts or comments have been lost in the process.
Okay.
And we are recorded, too.
Anyone else? Someone else again? Chris?
Chris Flynn, 597 Hall Hill Road. I want to thank the zoning committee for all their hard work over the last year. Definitely not an enviable job to keep everyone happy in town. But I think your efforts stay within the charter. When I was looking at the charter online for the zoning committee, Just a few that stuck out at me: to protect and promote public health, safety, welfare, convenience, and property values, to lessen congestion in streets, to avoid undue concentration of population, to preserve and protect unique character of the town. And I think, all in all, you guys have done that, and I commend the committee. We live in a beautiful town, and I think we want to keep it that way, and I thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh.
Go.
Hi, Patrice.
Hello?
Patrice Carson, 6 Camp Road. I have a couple of questions and some comments. First of all, your regulations on the website do list it as A2 as opposed to residential business.
Okay.
And I would think you might actually want to keep it as A2, because if you start calling it Residence B, it's going to get confusing with business zone. So you might want to leave it as A2.
Okay, A2.
I agree with the woman who got up about the PAR zone. Has the commission looked at any other sites where that actually would apply based on the requirements that are given for it?
We had not.
No.
We had not. So I think maybe it might be a good idea to look and see how many parcels in town it might apply to, and then look to see if you got it strong enough where you feel like it'll either protect or regulate what you need to regulate in those areas, because I'm sure it's more than just the one site. I also agree with not removing the basement requirement. Basements have been required here since at least 1980, and the bulk of the housing stock here was built between 1987 and 1995, and then there's been some more, but most houses in Summers, unless they go way back, don't have a basement. And part of the reason for that is for storage. It's helpful for less outbuildings on the property, sheds and pods and stuff like that, and I just think that there's no real reason to change that at this point. It looks like you've separated the hierarchy of home occupation requirements in the regulations, which I think is a good idea. I didn't know if maybe Glenn could explain the hierarchy, because it seems like there are some things that are allowed, a simple home office with just a copier, and maybe you have you're just you and you're doing work out of your house, that's permitted, and that's great. I get concerned when we start saying that I can have a doctor's office in any residential zone as long as I come in and see you guys for a special permit. And I have a concern about that. So I think we ought to, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think the intention was to create a hierarchy. There are many people these days who work out of their homes, either full-time or part-time, et cetera. And in certain situations, regulations don't even permit that. So we've got zoning violations all over the place. And so our goal in the regulations was to try to update them for the realities of the modern world, but also to try to create a hierarchy so that we put home occupations in neat little boxes, and if you're going to move and intensify your operation, there's a distinct possibility you've got to come back and see the commission and let your neighbors know that what you're doing, so that everybody can have a voice in the process. So I think we'll go through that categorization again, take a look at it, make sure those buckets are clear and make sense for Summers. But I think that kind of approach can work well.
Okay, and I also think we should allow, to some degree, tradesmen, and I'm not sure if you discussed that thoroughly enough in there, but just take a look at, allowing a plumber or an electrician to have operate the business out of his house and whatever, just make sure that that's covered, because I know that's been a concern. I have just a question about the winery and brewery specifications. It doesn't say anywhere that I could see whether or not that it's required that the product be grown on site, or a percentage of the product be grown on site. So can I just open up a winery and haul my grapes in from Napa Valley and do all that, or do I need to grow a percentage on site? And I think we should look at doing that as well. You have somewhere in there where it says government needs permits. I think government's exempt. It's in the I think it's on page 55. But I think this town's exempted, at least the town, from getting permits. So you might want to look at And the last thing I have is the motor vehicle sales and service. What is the intention of the zoning commission on that? Where do you want to allow motor vehicle sales and service? Are they separate, where maybe you want to allow service but not necessary sales? Because it's a little, to me, it was a little confusing looking through where it's allowed and what is allowed. It looks like it's allowed in the industrial area and the business area, maybe in the village area. I think that's been a bone of contention for years, and I think you ought to make sure of what it is you want to allow, whether it's separate or together, and where. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I'm John Clark, 104 Hamden Road. See, I just have a question about the floodplain overlay district. And I imagine that you're updating it, which means you're adding more designated floodplain, is that correct?
No. So, I think there's two things that are going on with regard to the floodplain regulations. The federal government does flood insurance studies. I think the most recent one for Summers was in 1986. So we've incorporated the existing floodplain study, which is, everybody is subject to today. So all we're doing is putting that delineation on the map. We haven't changed anything. Within the text, the state and federal government last fall issued new model floodplain regulations, and they contain new standards for what's called freeboard. So if you're going to build a house in the floodplain, the old requirement was that this is flood level, you could build your house right at that level. The new requirement is for freeboard above that. So if you're going to build a house in a floodplain, it may be flooding more in the future, that you have to have freeboard. So it's updating the text to reflect the current standards and just putting the districts which currently exist on the map so that people don't have to go searching for them in the town clerk's office. They'll be online and so on. So that was our intent.
Right. So if someone had property that they were trying to sell, and it had been on the market for some time, and then they finally were going to sell it, and then we're hit with, oh, now we're reassessing the floodplain.
But we're not.
Yeah, we're not.
What he said is, we're applying the designation of where the floodplain is to the map. It's been designated as such since 1986.
I believe the date is in the reg.
So we're not creating any new area, it's just finally catching up with the map.
We're just showing it on the map, right?
Well, it's gonna be shown accurately.
Transparency as to where it exists. So there's real limitations in a floodplain district occur for somebody who wants to build a structure. Because now flood insurance premiums come into play, and somebody who builds there, A, may not be able to do it, or if they did do it, they're gonna, in addition to their mortgage, they're gonna have flood insurance premiums. So the town is not involved in this. We are just the agent for the federal government here in terms of allowing them to administer the program, for people to know that there's property in the floodplain or whatever.
So it was always marked then as floodplain?
If someone had researched to purchase a property, it would have come up in the research. Now it's just gonna be on a map.
If I can just clarify that, it hasn't been on the zoning map historically. In the town clerk's office, the floodplain maps are on the wall, or in a drawer. You have to know where to look for them.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is, again, just so everybody knows that this area near their house may flood at some time in the future, et cetera.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Eva Brown, 125 Watchdog Road. I have a question. During his PowerPoint presentation, okay, he mentioned accessory apartments. Would somebody explain, how you're handling that situation? Would those be in all the zones?
That would be like an in-law apartment.
Right, that was in the presentation. Is that what the commission is considering?
We've always considered that. They're attached to the house with a common door.
So you allow those in A zones, A1 zones, any zones?
I don't, you know what, I don't know if it's, I think it is in either zone, don't you?
I'm not sure that it was an A zone, but it's certainly an
I'm
A1.
looking in A zone right now, base,
It's accessory apartment.
accessory,
Page 36.
No, he's looking at the use chart.
yeah, the one that counts. Have we always allowed in-laws?
No, we didn't.
No. Right.
Okay.
Well, there are in-law apartments in town that are,
It's not allowed it's not allowed in A, it's a zoning permit for A1 and A2.
A2.
Yeah.
So it's not allowed in an A zone, but allowed in an A1?
And an
Correct.
A2.
in an A2.
Yeah.
Which
Okay,
would be the
that's in the new
business zone.
regulations?
And-
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what about the existing regulations?
In A and A1?
Well, there wasn't an A2 zone.
Right,
Yeah.
but in A
Well,
and
A and
A1?
A1.
I believe it was allowed in A1 before.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was
And are
allowed.
you changing the lot sizes at all?
No.
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 Nope, the lots are all.
One
Still
acre.
still 40,000 square feet minimum, which is a builder's acre. As-
And you allow accessory apartments on those properties?
We, no, go ahead.
Accessory apartments are allowed on a 1 acre property and currently on an A1 zone, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
With a zoning permit.
Right, so you're basically creating a two-family house, and what concerns me is that in most of the town, we all rely on wells, we have the aquifer in town, we don't have sewer system. I really think that we should not allow accessory apartments, in those zones as far as a density issue.
You mean in currently A and A1?
Right, I don't
Okay.
think we should, allow accessory apartments on a 1 acre piece of land, because, you know, ideally, you would want 2 acre zoning for a house, you know, for better aquifer protection, but we don't have that, and I understand that, but you're really putting two families, on 1 acre of property, and I was at one of these hearings that, when you were working on the regulations, and the town attorney was here, and he said, you really can't enforce how many people live in an accessory apartment, et cetera. So you're really winding up with probably 2 families on 1 acre, and that's a concern. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else?
Nobody else?
Someone else?
Anybody else? Public comment?
Looks like a wrap.
Yep. There's mine.
Anyone? Good notes?
Mine.
No?
Little.
Yep, now you're in trouble. There you go.
Okay. So if nobody else has any comments? No? Once, twice? So again, we'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight to our public information meeting, giving us your thoughts, feedback, questions, concerns. I expect, we're gonna take everything you've said. Glenn's taking notes. Next time we meet, we're gonna go through these things and, look at each item. I expect that the next step for the commission will be to, not only take the input, but, put together another draft. This process is gonna take several months. It's not likely that there'll be any further updates until the fall of this year or later. So once again, thank you all for coming out.
And talk about how there will be public hearings.
If any, sometimes you have to speed
Mention
driving
it.
home,
Mention it.
you think of something, say,
There will
which
be
I've
public
said.
hearings.
This is Jennifer
Before
Roy,
anything's
her
adopted.
email address is jroy, 4 letters, jroy, R-O-Y, @summercc.gov. So over the next week,
Make
if
sure
you
you
have
have
thoughts or
the
comments, just email Jen, we'll add those to our file, and we'll be on our way, so thank you very much.
Hey, Chet.
Did you just walk in?
Always making trouble, you said.
No, sir.
How
What,
you
did you
doing?
read it? Did you read it?
Yeah.
Anything bother you?
Everything bothers
No?
Is the meeting adjourned?
This is is our opportunity to fix the corner. The township by the
Which one?
We need to make a motion.
yellow heart.
Yeah.
What?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, make a motion, yeah, we're
Make a
not.
motion to
We're coming in there.
I made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Carl, second, all in favor on adjourning? Paige, adjourn, all in favor? Aye.